First of all, friends, on behalf of the Rose family, I'd like to wish all of you a Shana Tova Metuka, a sweet and good year. And I say that on behalf of the entire family, Laura, Zachy, Elliot, and Scott, and Chloe, and Joshua and Chana, and Eliav, and Coco, and Rafi, and Tanya, Melanie, who is here with us today, and last but not least, you know who that's going to be, Lorraine. Hi, Lorraine. And her twin sister, Angela. I want you to know that my remarks today are the result of a collaborative effort. All of my family had something to say in this, and most often they were wrong, but occasionally right. And if after the sermon you don't like what you've heard, you give your complaints to them, and if there are any nice words, give them to me. Appreciate that. As we all know, Kol Nidre begins the most sacred day in our Jewish lives. The mere voicing of these two words have a mysterious power, bringing into our minds a sense of solemnity and holiness. It's strange that such incredibly powerful words are unknown as to author or date of authorship. In addition, it's striking to note that this entire solemn day of prayer and fasting does not begin with a prayer. If you've noticed in your prayer books, it is a statement rejecting so much that we have done during the year. But it is not a prayer. The new translation in our prayer book introduces the word God to it and softens some of the words. I happen to disagree with that. I don't think they should be softened. It is not a prayer, and it was not meant to be a prayer. It was written very clearly with one thing in mind: the disavowal of all oaths made during the year. Now, this is very important because the Aramaic in which the prayer is written has not changed. But it is important to be aware of the fact that it is not a prayer. Now, friends, you have to know that there were many disagreements and serious discussions about that text, but always looming in the background was a painful reality that during times of extreme persecution, when our forebears were forced at the sword to convert to Christianity, and the words of Kol Nidre provided some measure of comfort and solace to those whose lives had been tormented by their false conversions. Nevertheless, throughout the Middle Ages, well-known rabbis had profound concerns about both the content and recitation of this Kol Nidre declaration, and it was a source of ongoing contention. As a matter of fact, They went so far as to call the text a minhag shus. In Hebrew, a ridiculous or foolish, nonsensical statement. Minhag shtus. From a Jewish legal standpoint, there is an entire set of laws in the Talmud having to do with the making of vows. And therefore, through the centuries, some rabbis dissatisfied with the text provided altered texts, interpretations, and most surprisingly, and this was long before Reform Judaism came to existence, some scholars completely eliminated the Kol Nidre from the text of the service. But there was something that overrode everything in this. Even though there were disagreements by the rabbis in so many generations, there was the development of a chant, the Kol Nidre chant, which you've all heard. And incidentally, we don't know the composer or the date of that composition either. But that melody somehow caught on, and the cantors through the centuries, kept that melody essentially intact. And the version that you heard last night was a relatively contemporary arrangement for instruments, but it's the same melody that you heard the cantor sing last night. Now, this has always been a very moving experience, no matter what the text says, because music somehow of this prayer, the mood of this day, has somehow captured us into a mood of supplication, of sweetness and bitterness, supplications to God that makes the heart weep. Now, we also have to be aware that during the Middle Ages, which we can mark from approximately the 5th century to the 19th century, was a terrible era in Jewish history. While it is true that occasionally there were some special moments, such as in Spain, the Golden Age of Spain as we refer to it, when there were some positions, very high positions in government that were held by Jews. In the 15th century, in the Renaissance, there was a great musician, and I think that from time to time, you've heard some of that music here, composed by Solomon Russi. Cantor, have you used some Russi? Fascinating. But let's face it, the Middle Ages generally were brutal. Finally, it began to emerge into a better life when in the 19th century, only in the 19th century, the countries of Europe, across a whole century, all the 1800s to 1904, Jews were allowed citizenship. It's hard to believe, but that's how recent it was. But at the same time, there were problems. There were all kinds of difficult moments that Jewish communities suffered. There were attacks and ultimately pogroms. And therefore, things were extremely painful, even though superficially many things had changed. So, the time came When news began to spread about this country across the ocean, and as a result of that, we know what happened. Our forebears moved to this country. We were a nation of immigrants. The founding fathers themselves immigrants, or were the children or grandchildren of immigrants, unless they were miraculously born of the womb of American soil. Now, I want you all to know that I was not born of the womb of American soil. So I have in my hand my father's arrival in the United States, a picture of the ship in which he traveled, and also the ship's manifest with his name on it. It's an amazing thing. But this is an example of the reality of what happened with Jews coming from Europe. And by the way, I would encourage everyone who hasn't already done it, you can find your own families when they came here. You can find a picture of their ship and a picture of the ship's manifest with their names. Look for it. Fascinating. So, we are indeed a country of immigrants. And we should think of this more often, because during the last year, especially, the word immigrant or refugee is often referred to in a condescending, derisive manner. Now, most often, I think we have to admit that it doesn't feel very important to us anymore, or we don't think consciously of ourselves as children of immigrants. And that's my point. Occasionally, we should be conscious of the fact that we are immigrants, or the children, or the grandchildren, or the great-grandchildren of immigrants who fled from hate and hopelessness across the seas to a dreamed-up hopefulness on these shores. And indeed, that hopefulness over time has enabled us to become equal partners in a unique system of government. And literally, hundreds of millions of people arrived here for a variety of reasons to find light and to leave darkness behind. Think of it. It is our system, because our Constitution and our Bill of Rights is ours. Now, there are some people and groups who consider themselves as somehow more than others as to their authenticity as Americans. Indeed, there are too many who look down on other human beings as beneath the dignity of their social status. That's very unfortunate. It's the way it is. And then there are the extreme right-wing flag wavers who, in their hatred of the other, consider themselves to be superior and pure. To them, our Constitution is an overriding force, a clear and powerful response. And this is the brilliance of our founding fathers. In their own lives, they occasionally miss the mark, as we all do, but the system that they developed provided constitutionally structural ways to deal with existing and future unanticipated problems. They were brilliant. The founders of our country developed the finest system of governance known on earth, structured on an absolutely required system of checks and balances. They carefully studied other systems, and they knew basically that they had to guard against unbridled power. Now, generally, we're very aware of what this country means to us, but there are times when we have an obligation to keep that awareness in the front of our minds. When, for example, the present alarming divisiveness is absolutely burdening our country. When this sort of thing happens, we can tend to be cynical or withdraw. Indeed, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. Friends, this is our country, and our country requires us to fulfill our responsibilities as citizens, to be mindful of our superb achievements, to acknowledge our wrongs, to recognize that we are collectively responsible for them, even if only indirectly, and cannot allow ourselves the luxury of escaping the heavy role we must accept as citizens in being relentless in our efforts to assist avoiding in the future ongoing mistakes or evil acts that we or our nation have committed in the past. And then we ask forgiveness for the sins we have committed by needlessly aligning with heartless dictatorships, for the sin we have committed by the meaningless prattle of our lips, for the sin which we have committed by unprovoked aggression, and for the sin of turning away the refugee, for the sin we have committed by ignoring the dispossessed, and for the sin we have committed by bellicose rhetoric, for the sin which we have committed by neglecting the aging, for the sin of an economic system that slights our teachers, for the sin of an economic system that allows children to go hungry at night. So for all of these things, and more, and more, and more, and more, we ask forgiveness. Now I'd like to ask you please to join me on page 88 of the prayer book in the reading on the left side of the page, page 89, Failures of Justice. Together, we dishonor you. It is always difficult to feel that as individuals, we can truly have an impact on our nation here and abroad. Little old me is what we often think of it. We can't do anything. But time has proven over and again that in collaboration with others and with persistence and with patience and determination, our impact can be truly amazing. We, the people, can be partners in creating a more perfect union. Eternal vigilance is the price. Now, our Constitution and Bill of Rights have survived many struggles. It has seen us through a civil war, 2 world wars, the internal turbulence over the Vietnam War, the Iraqi War, all too many other military involvements, which tragically have caused the death of so many sacred lives. And then the civil rights struggle, and the disgraceful McCarthy era, which shook our nation and destroyed so many decent people. Maybe you have know some of those friends. I knew a couple of them in New York City. We've survived the murder of a president and the attempted murder of another. And also we've survived the impeachment of a president. Our Constitution is still in place, despite so many challenges of a direct and indirect nature. And now we are in the middle of a national political turbulence rocking the nation. Will the Constitution survive this one? Well, you knew I was going to get there sooner or later. This will be very brief, but let me first say that I am deeply grateful to the current President of the United States for 2 reasons. First, he has provided the entire rabbinate in the United States enough material for several high holiday sermons. Second, he has brought out in me a need to outwardly express my sense of patriotism. And let me explain. When our children were young and right through college, there were times when I would laud the USA, expressing my feeling that we are living in a great country. But throughout life as a rabbi, I have felt that even as Jews, we have to confront our problems, so as we do on this day, confront our national problems. So I have always believed that it was my responsibility to address the controversial issues of the day, and after thoughtful consideration of a problem, to feel free to criticize our country when I believed something was out of kilter. Now, in this regard, my files contain endless sermons on so many issues. By that line, endless sermons was a gift to you tonight. This is the morning or this afternoon, whatever it is. Actually, I had written down endless number of sermons, not endless sermons. So my comments will be brief, at least for a rabbi. And I'm not going to talk about political issues. There is only one area that I will address, very directly, shorn of any political correctness. I am tired of allowing every outrage simply to run out of steam and just allow them to hover in the background and then die. You know the history: discrimination in housing, the Central Park Five, claim of proof that the first black presidential candidate was not born in the United States. the reference that Mexicans are murderers, rapists, and thieves. Remember that one? Verbally disqualifying a federal judge because of where his family came from. Describing some of the Nazis and white supremacists marching at night with torches and Confederate flags and signs of hate toward blacks and Jews as fine people. And in the morning after that evening march, standing in front of the Beth Israel, yeah, that was the name of the synagogue in Charlottesville on Shabbat. Some fine people. Now, compounding the problem, while many individuals did speak out, neither the House of Representatives nor the Senate had the decency to censure the president. And friends, forget for the moment 6 million, but almost 500,000 American military were killed. And God knows how many were wounded. Now, there's one other item on this list. There are Jews who believe that my theme this morning is political. One of those Jews is a court Jew of the president, sitting at high office in his cabinet, and who didn't even have the decency to utter one word of criticism. On the contrary, he said he stood by his boss's statement. This is too much. I am tired of this hypocrisy. Friends, every other week comes another statement dividing this nation. Every other day almost, there's one punch and counterpunch by the same man. And that's a polite way of saying, and we all know it's true, that we're dealing with an inveterate liar. Friends, I have nothing left to say. There have been enough rationalizations. There are no more red lines to cross. He is unfit to be president. He has proven himself over and again to be a bigot. As Martin Luther King once said, silence is betrayal. The shofar has been sounded and has warned us. This man must be impeached. So may it come to be.